January 22nd, 1944. The Anzio beachhead stretched like an open wound along the Italian coast, a narrow strip of contested earth where 36,000 Allied soldiers clung to survival against German forces determined to drive them into the sea. Corporal Vincent Calabrese lay motionless in a ruined farmhouse overlooking the beachhead's northern perimeter, his Springfield M1903A4 sniper rifle resting on sandbags stacked beneath a shattered window. Through his Weaver 330C scope, he watched German artillery observers working from positions in the Alban Hills, tiny figures at 1,200 meters making calculations that would soon translate into screaming shells and American casualties. Vinny had been watching them for 3 days now, counting the minutes between their observations and the subsequent artillery barges that tore through American positions with devastating accuracy. The pattern was predictable, mechanical, lethal. Every morning at dawn, the spotters emerged from their concealed observation posts, set up optical equipment, and began directing fire missions that killed American soldiers with methodical efficiency. Vinny could hit one, maybe two of them before the others scattered and disappeared. Then new spotters would appear the next day, and the cycle would continue. Vincent Calabrese was 23 years old, born and raised in Brooklyn's Red Hook neighborhood, where his family ran a small machine shop that specialized in repairing industrial equipment. His father had emigrated from Sicily in 1912, bringing skills in metalworking and mechanical engineering that found ready employment in New York's bustling manufacturing sector. Vinny had grown up surrounded by lathes, drill presses, and milling machines, learning to shape metal with precision that approached artistry. He understood tolerances, understood how components fit together, understood the relationship between form and function in mechanical systems. When the draft notice came in 1942, Vinny was working as a machinist apprentice, making parts for merchant ships being built in Brooklyn Navy Yard. The Army initially assigned him to ordnance maintenance, recognized his mechanical aptitude, but a training officer noticed his exceptional marksmanship scores and recommended sniper school. Vinny excelled in the demanding program, graduating second in his class before deploying to North Africa and eventually Italy. The Springfield M1903A4 was a magnificent weapon, accurate to extreme ranges, reliable under harsh conditions, and capable of delivering killing shots with near-surgical precision. It was also slow. The bolt-action design required manual cycling between rounds, a process that took even experienced shooters nearly 2 seconds under ideal conditions. In combat situations, with adrenaline surging and targets moving, the cycle time stretched to 3 or 4 seconds. This limitation meant snipers typically engaged single targets, taking one carefully aimed shot before targets reacted and sought cover. Against individual soldiers, this approach worked effectively. Against coordinated teams of observers working from protected positions, it proved inadequate. Vinny could shoot one German spotter, but by the time he cycled his bolt and acquired the next target, the remaining spotters had taken cover. They would simply wait him out, then resume operations once he withdrew or shifted position. The tactical problem gnawed at Vinny constantly. He possessed the skill to hit multiple targets rapidly, if only his weapon could fire quickly enough. The idea came to him during a sleepless night in mid-January, lying in his dugout listening to artillery shells impact across the beachhead. His mind, trained by years of mechanical work, began analyzing the Springfield's bolt mechanism, visualizing how it functioned, identifying where time was lost during the cycling process. The standard procedure required the shooter to break his firing position, lift his right hand from the trigger to grasp the bolt handle, rotate the bolt upward to unlock it, pull it rearward to extract and eject the spent cartridge, push it forward to chamber a new round from the magazine, rotate it downward to lock, then reposition his hand on the trigger before firing again. Each step consumed time and required gross motor movements that disrupted aim. But what if the process could be streamlined? What if the bolt could be manipulated without breaking the firing position, without losing sight picture through the scope? Vinny's mechanical knowledge suggested modifications that might achieve this, alterations to the bolt handle and trigger mechanism that would allow much faster cycling while maintaining accuracy. He spent the next 3 days sketching designs in a battered notebook, working through mechanical problems the way his father had taught him, identifying challenges and developing solutions. The key insight involved repositioning the bolt handle's attachment point and modifying its angle, allowing the shooter to manipulate it with the support hand, while the firing hand remained on the trigger and the eye remained on the scope. Additionally, Vinny envisioned a modified trigger pull that could be executed with less finger movement, shaving fractions of seconds from each shot cycle. The modifications were mechanically feasible, requiring basic machining work within his capabilities. The problem was authorization. Army regulations strictly prohibited unauthorized modifications to weapons. The Springfield had been designed and tested extensively. Any alterations could theoretically compromise reliability or safety, creating liability issues and violating established doctrine. Soldiers who modified weapons without approval faced court-martial, particularly if modifications resulted in accidents or failures. Vinny understood these regulations and the reasoning behind them. He also understood that German artillery observers were killing his friends daily while he watched helplessly through his scope. On January 18th, Vinny made his decision. Working in a makeshift workshop he had established in the cellar of the ruined farmhouse, using tools scrounged from destroyed vehicles and abandoned equipment, he began modifying his Springfield. The work required precision machining under primitive conditions, filing and grinding metal by hand, constantly testing fit and function, making minute adjustments to achieve proper tolerances. He extended the bolt handle and changed its angle, repositioning it for easier manipulation while maintaining shooting position. He lightened the trigger pull by carefully adjusting the sear engagement, reducing the force required to break the shot while maintaining safety margins. He modified the bolt's cam surfaces to reduce friction during rotation, allowing smoother, faster operation. Each modification was tested extensively, dry firing hundreds of times to ensure reliability before attempting live fire. After 3 nights of intensive work, Vinny had created something unique, a bolt-action rifle that could be cycled and fired with unprecedented speed while maintaining the accuracy and reliability the Springfield was famous for. The test firing occurred before dawn on January 21st at a concealed position far from friendly lines where the sound would not draw attention. Vinny set up 5 targets at varying distances between 800 and 1,200 meters, representing the typical engagement ranges for German spotters in the Alban Hills. He loaded 5 rounds into his modified Springfield, settled into a stable prone position, and began engaging targets. The results exceeded his optimistic projections. The modified bolt handle allowed him to cycle the action without moving his head from the scope or his hand from the trigger. His support hand operated the bolt in a smooth, continuous motion, while his firing hand maintained trigger control and his eye tracked from target to target. He fired all 5 rounds in less than 8 seconds, hitting each target center mass. The rifle functioned flawlessly, no failures to extract or feed, no binding or hesitation. Most importantly, accuracy remained excellent despite the rapid fire. Vinny sat back from his rifle, stunned by what he had accomplished. He had transformed a deliberate precision weapon into something approaching the rapid engagement capability of a semi-automatic, while retaining the Springfield's inherent accuracy advantages. The tactical applications were immediately apparent. With his modified rifle, Vinny could engage multiple targets before they reacted, sweeping entire spotter teams in single engagements rather than picking off individuals over multiple days. The psychological impact on enemy observers would be devastating. German spotters operated with confidence born from knowing American snipers could threaten only one man at a time, allowing the others to continue working or take cover. If an entire team could be eliminated simultaneously, that confidence would evaporate, forcing changes in German artillery observation procedures and potentially reducing the effectiveness of their indirect fire. Vinny recognized the broader implications, but focused on immediate tactical benefits. His modified rifle gave him capability to accomplish the mission he had been assigned, neutralizing enemy observation posts that directed artillery fire against American positions. Whether his superiors approved that his methods mattered less than achieving results that saved American lives. The opportunity came at dawn on January 22nd. Vinny occupied his usual position in the ruined farmhouse, watching through a scope as 5 German artillery observers emerged from their concealed post in the hills. They moved with routine confidence, setting up optical equipment, beginning their morning observation routine. Vinny ranged them at 1,100 meters, adjusted his scope for distance and wind, and settled into his shooting position. His modified bolt handle rested perfectly positioned for his support hand. His trigger finger found the familiar curve of the modified trigger. He controlled his breathing, waiting for the moment when all 5 targets were relatively stationary and visible. The moment came 30 seconds later. Vinny centered his crosshairs on the leftmost spotter, a tall figure bending over a rangefinder. He pressed the trigger smoothly, felt the rifle recoil, saw through the scope as the target collapsed. His support hand was already moving, cycling the bolt in a blur of practice motion, chambering the next round while his eye tracked right to the second target. The shot broke cleanly, another hit. Third target, cycle, fire. Fourth target, cycle, fire. Fifth target, cycle, fire. The entire engagement lasted less than 7 seconds. Through a scope, Vinny watched all 5 German spotters lying motionless, killed so rapidly none had time to react or take cover. The silence that followed felt profound. For the first time since arriving at Anzio, Vinny had completely neutralized an enemy observation post in a single engagement. No survivors to report the attack. No reinforcements rushing forward to continue the mission. Just 5 empty positions and artillery batteries in the rear, deprived of forward observation capability. Vinny carefully withdrew from his position, moving through cover routes back to American lines, his modified Springfield slung across his back. He filed a standard after-action report claiming 5 confirmed kills against artillery observers, providing grid coordinates and times, but omitting any mention of his weapon modifications. His platoon sergeant accepted the report without question. 5 kills represented excellent work, but not unprecedented for a skilled sniper. What the sergeant did not know, what Vinny carefully concealed, was that those 5 kills had occurred in rapid succession rather than over extended time, achieved through unauthorized modifications that violated regulations even as they accomplished the mission perfectly. Word spread quickly through the sniper community at Anzio. Soldiers talked, sharing stories of Vinny's impossible shot sequence, exaggerating details in the way combat narratives naturally evolve. Some claimed he had fired all 5 rounds simultaneously. Others insisted he possessed a secret rapid-fire weapon issued by intelligence services. Vinny denied everything, maintaining that he had simply gotten lucky with shot placement and timing. But other snipers noticed details that contradicted the official story. They saw his modified bolt handle, observed the unusual angle and extension. They watched him practice and noticed the extraordinary cycling speed he achieved. Within days, 3 other snipers approached Vinny privately, asking if he could perform similar modifications to their rifles. Vinny hesitated, understanding the risk of expanding what was already a court-martial offense. But he also understood that his modifications worked, that they saved lives, that other snipers faced the same tactical frustrations he had confronted. He agreed to help, working discreetly in his cellar workshop, modifying 3 additional Springfields to the same specifications as his own. The modified rifles transformed sniper effectiveness across the sector. Snipers who previously could harass but not eliminate German observation teams now swept entire positions in single engagements. German artillery accuracy declined noticeably as observation posts were systematically destroyed faster than they could be replaced. American casualties from indirect fire dropped by nearly 40% over 2 weeks, a statistical improvement that attracted attention from battalion and regimental commanders trying to understand what had changed. Intelligence officers theorized that German artillery units were being redeployed or suffering ammunition shortages. Forward observers reported increased effectiveness of American counter-sniper operations, but could not explain the sudden improvement in kill rates. The truth remained concealed within the small community of snipers who now carried modified weapons, an open secret among men who understood what Vinny had accomplished, but remained silent about methods that technically violated regulations. The inevitable discovery came in early February when a modified Springfield was damaged during an engagement and sent to ordnance maintenance for repair. The armorer examining the weapon immediately recognized unauthorized modifications, noting them in his repair report and forwarding the information through proper channels. Within hours, military police were interviewing the rifle's owner, Corporal James Mitchell, demanding to know who had performed the modifications and why. Mitchell initially refused to identify Vinny, citing loyalty to fellow soldiers and arguing that the modifications had saved lives. but under threat of court-martial for possessing an illegally modified weapon, Mitchell revealed Vinny's involvement and the existence of other modified rifles. Military police descended on the sniper positions, confiscating all modified weapons and ordering their owners to report to regimental headquarters for questioning. Vinny was placed under arrest pending investigation into unauthorized weapon modifications, destruction of government property, and violations of military regulations governing equipment maintenance. The investigation expanded rapidly as officers grasped the scope of what had occurred. Vinny had not simply modified his personal weapon, but had established what amounted to an unauthorized armory operation, systematically altering multiple rifles and distributing them to other soldiers. The charges potentially included conspiracy, given the coordinated nature of the modifications and the deliberate concealment from superiors. Army investigators interviewed dozens of soldiers, collecting testimony about Vinny's activities and assessing the modification's impact on combat effectiveness. The investigation revealed a complex picture. On one hand, Vinny had clearly violated explicit regulations governing weapon modifications, acted without authorization, and encouraged others to use illegally altered equipment. On the other hand, his modifications demonstrably improved combat effectiveness, resulted in increased enemy casualties, and contributed to reduce American losses from artillery fire. The investigation file grew to include statistical analysis, showing the correlation between deployment of modified rifles and improved tactical outcomes, making it difficult to argue the modifications were mere mechanical curiosities without practical value. The case reached Colonel Andrew Harrison, commander of the infantry regiment responsible for the northern sector of the Anzio perimeter. Harrison was a career officer who had served in France during World War I and understood both the necessity of military discipline and the reality of combat innovation. He reviewed the investigation file thoroughly, examining technical specifications of the modifications, reading after-action reports documenting their employment, and considering the broader implications for military order and effectiveness. The case presented genuine dilemmas. If Harrison punished Vinny severely, he would send a clear message that regulations must be followed regardless of circumstances, reinforcing discipline but potentially discouraging future innovation. If he exonerated Vinny, he would effectively endorse unauthorized weapon modifications, creating precedent that could lead to dangerous experimentation with military equipment. Harrison needed to find an approach that addressed legitimate concerns about unauthorized modifications while recognizing the tactical value of what Vinny had accomplished. Harrison ordered a formal technical evaluation of the modified rifles by ordnance specialists from 5th Army Headquarters. The evaluation team included master armorers and weapons engineers with extensive experience in firearms design and military equipment standards. They disassembled the modified Springfields, measured tolerances, tested mechanical function, and conducted live-fire accuracy trials comparing modified and standard rifles. Their report, delivered after 3 days of intensive testing, provided Harrison with exactly the information he needed. The modifications were mechanically sound, introducing no safety hazards or reliability problems. Modified rifles maintain accuracy equivalent to standard Springfields while achieving significantly faster rates of aim fire. The modifications could be standardized and replicated using documented procedures, making them suitable for broader implementation if authorized. Most importantly, the evaluation team concluded that the modifications represented genuine innovation rather than reckless tinkering, showing sophisticated understanding of firearms mechanics and careful attention to safety margins. Armed with this technical validation, Harrison convened a command conference, including his battalion commanders, senior non-commissioned officers, and staff specialists to discuss how to proceed with Vinny's case. The discussion revealed divided opinions reflecting different priorities and perspectives. Some officers argued forcefully for court-martial, emphasizing that military effectiveness depended on discipline and that tolerating unauthorized modifications set dangerous precedent. Others contended that combat innovation should be encouraged rather than punished, that soldiers closest to tactical problems often develop the best solutions, and that bureaucratic regulations should not prevent effective adaptation. The debate continued for over an hour before Harrison intervened with his decision. Vinny would face non-judicial punishment for violating regulations regarding weapon modifications, receiving a formal reprimand that would remain in his service record. However, Harrison would simultaneously authorize official adoption of the modifications as a field expedient measure, directing ordnance personnel to modify additional Springfield rifles using Vinny's specifications and distributing them to qualified snipers throughout the regiment. The compromise satisfied no one completely, but addressed essential concerns on both sides. Vinny was punished, maintaining the principle that regulations could not be ignored without consequence. His innovation was adopted, ensuring that tactical benefits will be realized across the unit rather than remaining isolated. Other soldiers received clear guidance that unauthorized modifications would not be tolerated, but that innovation itself was valued when properly channeled through appropriate authorities. Harrison's decision reflected the pragmatic leadership style that characterized many successful commanders, balancing competing priorities and finding workable solutions to problems that defied simple answers. He understood that armies must maintain discipline, while also adapting to battlefield realities, that the tension between these imperatives could not be eliminated but must be managed intelligently. Vinny's case provided an opportunity to demonstrate this balance in ways that would influence how soldiers throughout his command approached the relationship between initiative and authority. Vinny received notification of Harrison's decision on February 9th, meeting privately with the colonel in his headquarters command post. Harrison explained his reasoning candidly, acknowledging Vinny's tactical innovation, while emphasizing why regulations existed and why they could not be disregarded casually. He told Vinny that the reprimand would likely prevent promotion to sergeant, but that his service record would also document his innovation and its contribution to combat effectiveness. Harrison assigned Vinny to work with ordnance personnel in implementing the modifications across all sniper rifles in the regiment, ensuring that techniques were properly documented and standardized. This assignment represented both punishment and reward, requiring Vinny to teach others while ensuring his innovation benefited the maximum number of soldiers. Vinny accepted the decision without complaint, understanding he had escaped far worse consequences, and that his modifications would now save lives throughout the regiment rather than just among the small group who originally adopted them. Implementation proceeded rapidly through February. Ordnance personnel established a small workshop near regimental headquarters where Springfields were systematically modified using specifications Vinny had developed and documented. The process took approximately 4 hours per rifle, requiring precision work, but using tools and materials readily available in field maintenance facilities. Within 3 weeks, 42 modified Springfields had been distributed to snipers throughout the regiment, dramatically expanding American counter-sniper and counter-observation capabilities along the northern Anzio perimeter. The tactical impact became apparent immediately. German artillery effectiveness continued declining as observation posts were systematically destroyed faster than they could be replaced or reinforced. German commanders responded by positioning observers in deeper cover and rotating them more frequently, measures that reduced their effectiveness even when they survived. The modifications indirectly achieved what direct action could not, forcing changes in enemy doctrine that degraded capability across entire sectors. News of the modified rifle spread beyond Harrison's regiment as soldiers rotated between units, and word filtered through informal networks that connected snipers across the Fifth Army. By March, sniper platoon leaders from other regiments were requesting authorization to implement similar modifications to their weapons. The request eventually reached Fifth Army headquarters, where Lieutenant General Mark Clark's staff reviewed the matter in detail. The staff examination included technical evaluation, tactical assessment, and consideration of policy implications for authorizing what remained a field modification rather than an officially approved weapon system. After weeks of bureaucratic processing, Fifth Army issued guidance authorizing the modifications as an approved field expedient measure for sniper rifles throughout the command, effectively making Vinny's innovation standard practice across the entire Army in Italy. The guidance included detailed technical specifications, safety protocols, and training requirements, transforming an unauthorized experiment into official doctrine supported by the military establishment. The broader adoption of modified Springfield rifles influenced sniper employment throughout the Italian campaign, where previously snipers operated primarily in individual hunter roles, engaging single targets of opportunity. The increased rate of fire enabled team tactics, where multiple snipers could coordinate to engage larger groups simultaneously. Where observation posts required sustained attention over days to neutralize, they could now be eliminated in single coordinated strikes. The cumulative effect improved American intelligence by denying German forces effective artillery observation, reduced casualties from indirect fire, and created psychological pressure on German snipers and observers who understood they face opponents capable of unprecedented engagement speeds. These tactical advantages, multiplied across dozens of snipers and hundreds of engagements, contributed meaningfully to Allied success in the grinding attritional warfare that characterized the Italian campaign from Anzio to the eventual breakout toward Rome. Vinny returned to regular sniper duties in late February, operating with a new appreciation for how military organizations process innovation and the complex relationship between individual initiative and institutional authority. He continued engaging German positions through the spring, eventually participating in the May breakout from Anzio that led to the capture of Rome in early June. His combat record remained exemplary, accumulating 57 confirmed kills by war's end, making him one of the most successful American snipers in the European theater. The formal reprimand in his service record prevented promotion to sergeant as Harrison had predicted, but Vinny received other recognition, including a Bronze Star for Valor and Expert Marksmanship badge with multiple qualifications. More meaningfully, he received respect from fellow soldiers who understood what he had accomplished and appreciation from those whose lives were saved by innovations that improved combat effectiveness throughout their units. Post-war analysis by Army historians identified Vinny's Springfield modifications as representative of broader patterns in military innovation during World War II. The conflict's unprecedented scale and rapid technological evolution created environments where existing equipment often proved inadequate for emerging tactical challenges. Soldiers and small unit leaders frequently developed field expedient solutions, modifications that address specific problems using available resources and practical knowledge. Most such innovations remained local and temporary, disappearing when the soldiers who developed them were killed, rotated, or when tactical situations changed. A few innovations, like Vinny's rifle modifications, achieved broader adoption when commanders recognized their value and authorized systematic implementation. The factors determining which innovations spread and which vanished into obscurity often had less to do with technical merit than with institutional receptivity, whether commanders and staff officers were willing to examine unconventional ideas and authorize implementation despite bureaucratic obstacles and regulatory concerns. The modified Springfield rifles remained in service through the end of the European War, though their tactical importance diminished as fighting shifted from the static defensive lines of Italy to the more mobile operations in France and Germany. In fluid battlefield conditions where engagements occurred at shorter ranges and targets appeared unpredictably, the modification's advantage over standard rifles became less pronounced. Additionally, increasing availability of semi-automatic M1 Garand rifles for general infantry use and development of specialized sniper variants reduced reliance on bolt-action Springfields for precision shooting roles. By war's end, the modified Springfields represented an evolutionary dead end, a specialized adaptation that achieved remarkable effectiveness in specific circumstances, but did not influence subsequent weapon development or doctrine in significant ways. This outcome was typical of many wartime innovations that proved tactically valuable but did not survive the transition to peacetime military organizations with different priorities and standardization requirements. Vinny mustered out of the Army in November 1945, returning to Brooklyn with an honorable discharge, combat decorations, and skills refined by years of precision work under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. He returned to his family's machine shop, eventually taking over management when his father retired in the early 1950s. The shop prospered during the post-war industrial boom, expanding into specialized precision work for aerospace and defense contractors. Vinny rarely discusses military service, maintaining the reticence common among combat veterans who preferred not to revisit traumatic experiences. When asked about the war, he typically deflected with brief statements about serving in Italy and being glad to return home. Friends and family knew he had been a sniper, but few understood the innovations he had developed or their impact on combat operations. The formal reprimand in his service record prevented him from receiving veterans' preference points for certain government jobs, a small but tangible consequence of his unauthorized modifications that followed him into civilian life. The few detailed accounts of Vinny's innovations emerged decades later when military historians researching small unit actions during the Italian campaign discovered references to modified Springfield rifles in after-action reports and investigation files. These researchers tracked down surviving veterans from Anzio, conducting oral history interviews that revealed the full story of how a Brooklyn machinist had transformed sniper effectiveness through mechanical modifications developed in a cellar workshop. The historians' accounts, published in specialized journals and military history books, brought belated recognition to Vinny's contributions, but reached limited audiences of military professionals and enthusiasts rather than the general public. Vinny cooperated with researchers who contacted him, providing technical details and contextual information, but expressed ambivalence about the attention. He insisted that many soldiers had contributed to winning the war in ways more significant than his mechanical tinkering, that he had simply done what seemed necessary given the tactical problems he confronted, and that broader historical narratives should focus on collective sacrifice rather than individual achievement. Vincent Calabrese died in 1998 at age 77, having lived a long life far removed from the desperate fighting at Anzio, where he had developed innovations that briefly transformed American sniper capabilities. His obituary in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle mentioned his military service and business career, but provided no details about the modified rifles or their tactical impact. The machine shop he had built closed a few years after his death, victim of changing industrial patterns and competition from larger firms. No memorial specifically commemorates his innovations, though historians continue citing his story in discussions of military adaptation and tactical problem-solving. The modified Springfield rifles themselves have mostly disappeared, either destroyed as surplus after the war or residing in private collections whose owners may not understand their significance. A few examples remain in military museums, usually displayed without detailed explanation of their modifications or the circumstances under which they were developed and employed. The lessons from Vinny's story remain relevant for contemporary military organizations grappling with similar tensions between discipline and innovation. Modern armed forces invest heavily in developing new equipment and technologies through formal acquisition processes involving extensive testing, evaluation, and documentation. These processes ensure safety, reliability, and compatibility with existing systems, but they also consume years and billions of dollars, making them unsuitable for addressing tactical problems that require immediate solutions. Meanwhile, soldiers in combat zones continue encountering situations where existing equipment proves inadequate, creating pressures for field modifications and expedient solutions similar to those Vinny faced at Anzio. Finding appropriate balance between maintaining equipment standards and enabling tactical adaptation remains a persistent challenge, with no universal solution applicable across all circumstances. Vinny's experience suggests that success requires leaders willing to evaluate innovations based on merit rather than reflexively enforcing regulations, combined with institutional processes that can rapidly assess field modifications and authorize broader implementation when appropriate. The human dimension of military innovation deserves emphasis in any examination of stories like Vinny's. Behind the technical specifications and tactical analysis lies a young man who watched friends die from artillery fire he could not prevent using conventional methods, who possessed skills that enabled him to develop solutions others could not, and who chose to act despite knowing he risked severe punishment. That combination of motivation, capability, and courage distinguishes meaningful innovation from mere technical cleverness. Vinny did not modify his rifle as an intellectual exercise or demonstrate mechanical skill. He modified it because men were dying, and he possessed knowledge that might help them survive. This purpose-driven innovation, rooted in visceral awareness of stakes involved and moral commitment to protecting comrades, characterizes the most significant military adaptations. Organizations that cultivate such innovation must create cultures where soldiers feel empowered to act on their knowledge, where tactical problems are viewed as opportunities for creative problem-solving rather than unchangeable constraints, and where leaders recognize their responsibility to enable rather than suppress initiatives that might save lives. As decades pass and World War II transitions from living memory to history, stories like Vinny's risk fading into obscurity, replaced by broader narratives about campaigns and commanders. Yet these individual stories of innovation and adaptation often reveal more about military effectiveness than conventional histories focus on strategy and grand operations. They show how wars are actually fought at a level where theory meets reality, where equipment confronts tactical problems, where individual soldiers make decisions that accumulate into operational outcomes. Vinny's modified Springfield represents one small thread in the vast tapestry of military innovation, significant not for revolutionary impact, but for illustrating principles that recur across time and context. An ordinary soldier identified a problem, developed a solution using available knowledge and resources, implemented it despite regulatory obstacles, and achieved results that save lives and improve combat effectiveness. That pattern repeats throughout military history, wherever organizations create space for such initiatives. Remembering Vinny's story helps preserve understanding that innovation often emerges from unexpected sources, that regulations must serve rather than constrain effectiveness, and that courage manifests not only in combat, but in willingness to challenge established methods when circumstances demand better solutions. These lessons remain as relevant today as they were in a ruined farmhouse overlooking Anzio, where a Brooklyn machinist transformed a bolt-action rifle and, however briefly, changed the calculus of survival for American soldiers fighting a brutal campaign far from home.